I will never forget it. The moment I put my arm into the jacket, I heard the second shot. And as a professional hunter, you know the sound of an animal being hit by a bullet. And I could clearly hear this one hit. And I think by then it kind of sunk in that it was probably your most feared situation. So we went to Big Bertha's remains. She was poached 4 years ago. With her, she had a 3-week-old calf. We called him Bertie. He was a little 3-week-old calf when his mom got poached. Obviously very traumatic situation for him. From there on, Bertie was taken to the vet at Louis Greef, and he was hand-reared there for about a year. So what we're going to be attempting to do in the next few days in conjunction with Onderstepoort and some well-known vets is that we're going to dehorn all our big rhinos, and we're also going to shape that horn and take off all the excess that we can. So basically when we leave that animal and we wake it up again, it's basically just going to be the little growth crown, like we call it, with a little bit of horn left over to just give it that push, and it'll start growing and it'll carry on growing from there. Hopefully that cancels out even more of a variable on the dehorning.
So students, you notice the stiffness and how. Guys, yep. Let's get underneath it. Okay, we ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3, donza! 1, 2, 3, donza! Push, 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 push. Alright. Yeah, we're gonna have to push a bit more. It's gonna fall back. 1, 2, 3. And pull the rope. So you pull the knee and you pull the rope. Push it up. We need guys pulling, 3 guys on the rope there. Let's go, let's go, let's pull. Okay, come on. Legs, right? You need to do something behind them? Okay, so you take all this. You can see their skin, there's the line. So you try and get all of this. Just to make it nice and round, eh? And keep part of the rest of it. Don't go any deeper where that bleeding is. Just cauterize that bleeding and just work your way around it. Okay, who's on this one, students? Which 2 students are doing this one?
This is our second lot of animals that we've immobilized. A cow with her calf. It's going really well. As you can see, we've dehorned it with a chainsaw and took off the excess horn, pretty much everything that's left, with an angle grinder. And as you can see, that is a really nice profile on that animal. Very little horn left. This is what we call effective dehorning. This prevents poaching. There's risk involved. We are knocking down rhinos, we're using dangerous drugs. There is a risk, but we need to weigh up the risk and the reward. We think that the reward for removing the horn is much better. The cons by removing the horn itself, Dr. Mycock standing there, they've done research in Zim back in the 80s when the rhino war, big rhino war was on, and they found no difference in rhinos with horns or without horns and their survivability. So in terms of calf survivability, hierarchy in a pod, there's no difference. Doesn't matter.
So we've been promoting this complete dehorning, you know, where a lot of people, vets have been coming in and just doing a cross-cut, leaving a bit of horn there, and so this technique we use is really a risk reduction process. You know, we want to try and get as much horn off the rhino as possible without damaging the horn, so that down the road, 5-10 years down the road, the horn's normal again. So that's the key. And the key of doing it, we think, is using a chainsaw. And I always tell people, if you go to Alaska, you know, when these guys do these ice sculptures with a chainsaw, they can make faces and stuff. So with enough practice with a chainsaw, you can actually get down to basically sculpting the horn. So there's just a small amount left. And then you have this profile that kind of fits to the face. And I think it's just less attractive to poachers. They look at an animal and they think the effort, they might kill one animal, but then if they've seen 10 that have been dehorned, then it just reduces the risk, you know. So yeah, and I think what I mean, one of the most important things I will say in terms of this exercise, particularly on Dr. Peter Oberon's farm, is there really should be a collective effort in the whole area, because, you know, you dehorn on this farm, it pushes pressure to other farms where there's been no dehorning. So I'm a great believer in is getting a decision for a number of farms, going in there one time, dehorning all the rhino, and then having a program where you come back and check them and you do that. Because if you don't do that, then I think you make other populations more vulnerable. Some of the criticisms that one might face when one does this, you know, is, well, what does it do? Does it affect social structure? Does it affect the behavior of the rhino? You know, one thing we did in Zim is when we started the dehorning program, which actually was first done in Namibia. You know, we went to Namibia and we saw the technique, and then we brought the technique to Zimbabwe. We had a PhD student from the States who joined us. I had a colleague who had a student who was looking for a PhD, and she was with us for 5 years. And so she did a PhD on looking at dehorning. She looked at the social structure. She published in peer-reviewed journals. She has all the data. So and so along with this good science, and then a collective effort where we decided to do all the rhino to try and reduce the risk equally across the country. But we can talk to people and say, look, have a look at these publications. This is the results in terms of social behavior, in terms of, and one of the criticisms that we've had with dehorning is, particularly the process of mobilizing and then dehorning, is that it affects calf recruitment. So, okay, calf's born and surviving. And we did, and this PhD student looked at a lot of the animals that we did with small calves, because they reckon that if you take the horns off rhino, they can't defend the calves anyway. They're pretty poor mothers anyway. So particularly with hyena. But the work in Zim, we definitely found that mothers were having calves and they were surviving. Sure, you know, rhinos lose calves anyway under normal circumstances. But we really didn't find a link with dehorning with increased mortality in calves. So we use good science. And we're not just a bunch of cowboys coming in here and doing things. You know, we want to know what's happening, and we want to know that down the road the rhinos are surviving, they're producing calves, and they're living. A dead rhino is a dead rhino. A rhino with a horn off, that's alive, is far preferable.
As you can see, we're dehorning the rhino, but at the same time we're doing DNA, we're ear notching, they're pregnancy testing, and the main reason for dehorning the rhino obviously is for security. What we're very blessed with is that it's a team effort with the guys from Ondersteport. There's a vet and his final year students, together with Mike Koch and the guys from the property. And I think it's vital that the young vets get to know how to handle the rhino, and also get to know that it's not just about rhino, it's about the whole ecology of the property, the whole economy of the property, what makes this property tick. I think that's very important.
So what are we doing when we have a rhino down? Is first of all, we ensure that rhino is safe. So the first thing when we approach it, we put a blindfold in, we put a rope on the back leg, and that's called a brake rope. So the students and the other people will help holding it, and that way we slow down the rhino, we get it to lie down. We check respiration, we check heart rate, we make sure that rhino is really doing well under the anesthetic. Once we're happy with that, we do DNA sample. And that's for RODIS, that's for the genetic banking, and that is used in case of rhino poaching incidents, that we actually have a record of each and every rhino in the country. And if it ever turns up at OR Tambo, we can link a rhino-horn back to the farm of origin. We take a blood sample and we put a gel core in, which is an intravenous access. It means that if anything goes wrong, that rhino is waking up and we need to give it a little bit more drugs. Or the rhino is not breathing well. We have an IV line in place. That means we can give drugs and it works very, very quickly. If I give a drug into the IV vein, within 5 to 10 seconds, that rhino will respond. And you know, the rhino being very thick-skinned, if I give it intramuscular, it will take a long time to actually give an effect. So it's very important to have that IV access. The other thing we do is we put a pulse oximeter on the ear. That actually checks for the oxygenation of the blood. So we can see how well is that rhino actually breathing and how well is it perfusing. And that's really, really important. So we want to have an oxygenation of 80%. That's really good. If we feel that rhino is not doing that, we can actually give potorphenol, which is one of the drugs to help respiration, as well as oxygen. And then if everything goes wrong, what we would actually do is abandon the whole procedure and wake that animal off, because the animal comes first. You know, we don't want a dead rhino. So if we feel the anesthetic is too much for that animal at this time, we reverse the animal, we let it go, and we come back at a later stage. It is a sample, but it also is actually a marking mechanism. So instead of putting a yellow ear tag in, which doesn't look very nice from the distance, the ear notching actually is done by a number system. So we can identify each animal from a distance. Because the microchip we implant obviously is very nice, we've got an ID on the animal, but if I'm looking in the veld from 200 meters, I wouldn't know who it is. And for a management purpose, I'm actually notching the ears, so we can say this is number 11. Number 11 had a bull calf. Number 11 breed with Rambo, the main rhino bull on the reserve. But we need to know that, because otherwise you're going to cause inbreeding in a small population. So it's part of the management. And also if you see an injury, you know number 11 is injured, we need to find number 11. So it's a management tool, and it's a less invasive. So we take a small part out of the ear, it's not going to harm the rhino, and it makes him very visible at the distance.
It's a really cool experience, and I think it's a really nice, they really teach us to get in hands-on, which is really nice, going from the theory to the practical. In theory they teach you, okay, you draw blood, you do this, you take the chainsaw, but once you get out there, you're like, okay, so let's do this. And it's really nice. They let us do the stuff, and we learn a lot, especially with some animals go down so nicely and some even didn't today. So you see the pros and the cons. You see when they drop in a difficult area, what do you have to do? You have to really think on your feet when things just turn around, and you have to take control of this situation. So it's really good experience, and I think we're getting a really nice advantage going into the system one day.
Here we stand at Fidelity in front of this massive door. Behind this door is the 50-odd kilograms of horn that was removed from my property, from my rhino, just 2-3 weeks ago. That horn is stored here. It's an exercise that one has to pay for on a monthly basis. Those costs, on top of the costs of security, dehorning, the veterinary fees, and again, additional security. For that reason, we spend money, and we spend continuously on various aspects. However, the product which is removed from the rhino in any case, for their safety and for their security, has to be stored at a cost with no return whatsoever in a place like this. The only way to save the rhino, the only way to benefit the communities, the only way to benefit this country, which today, because of the policies that have been followed, owns something like 98% of all the rhino in the world, is to ensure that there's legal trade. But in the meantime, we just close it up in a safe.